In today's video, I'm going to cover changing the Braille settings on your Polaris, including changing the Braille code, changing the Braille grade, and how to turn Braille on and off. I'll cover changing between Nemeth and UEB Math in a separate video because those settings are specific to the word processor and Polaris Math. So here's what you need to know to follow along with me in this video. First, I'm working on a Braille Sense Polaris 32-cell note taker. If you're using a Polaris Mini, don't worry, the keys and the keystrokes are the same. I'm also using firmware version 34477, so you may see a slightly different menu structure depending on your firmware version, but the settings we're going to cover today should be no different across firmware versions. Lastly, this video is for those who are new to the Polaris or those who just want to brush up on how to do certain things, so you won't need any experience with the Polaris to follow along. Before jumping in, I'd like to point out there are multiple ways to change the Braille settings. Generally, I like to adjust settings using the fewest keystrokes possible so that it takes the least amount of time. In this video, I'll cover changing the settings in the most efficient way possible, then follow it up with an alternative way of changing the settings. I cover both so you can use the approach that you are most comfortable with. If you find yourself having any trouble understanding which keys to press when I talk about keystrokes, such as the F3 button, I recommend that you check out our Polaris Essentials Hardware Overview video, which gives a complete physical description of the Polaris. So let's get started. Before we do anything, let's turn the Polaris on. To do this, locate the power button, which can be found on the front panel of the Polaris on the far right side. Press and hold the button until you hear a beep and feel a vibration. I have my Polaris turned on, and the first thing that is showing up is the main menu. At the top of the main menu is File Manager, so if you're following along and have File Manager showing on your Braille display or can see File Manager on your screen, then you're at the right spot. One of the first things you want to adjust on your Polaris is the Braille code. With the Polaris, you can choose UEB or US Braille, or choose a Braille code in a different language. The best way to do this is through the global options, so I'm going to use the hotkey space with the letter O to open the global options dialog box.
Braille display, B, on list item.
Now that I'm in global options, there are a few ways to navigate through these settings. The two most popular ways are to scroll through the settings or to use a shortcut key to jump to the setting. To scroll through the settings options, I'll use space with dot 4 to move down the list.
Braille cursor, C, 8 dot mode, E, off list item.
And I could use space with dot 1 to move up the list.
Braille cursor, C, blinking with Braille display, B, on list item.
Since I know the shortcut key for Braille code setting is the letter C, I'll use that instead. You'll find that in global options, the letter inside the parentheses next to each setting is the shortcut key, so I'll press the letter C and it jumps me to the first setting with that shortcut key.
Braille cursor, C, blinking list item.
Now, you'll notice pressing the letter C took me to the Braille cursor setting. This is because global options contains many settings, and some letters for navigation are repeated. To get to Braille code, I'm going to press the letter C again, and that places me on the Braille code settings.
Braille code, C, UEB list item.
Now that I'm at Braille code, the Polaris will announce which code you're currently using. I'm currently using UEB, but let's say I wanted to use French as my Braille code. To change the Braille code, I could use the spacebar to move forward, or backspace to move backwards through the different options. To get to French, I'll press the spacebar until I reach the French option.
Spanish. French.
Now, I really don't want my Braille code set to French, so I'm going to press backspace until I reach US Braille.
Spanish. UEB. US.
Once I have the Braille code set to what I want, I press enter to save my settings and exit the global options dialog box.
Options saved. File manager, F.
Next, let's change the Braille grade. Since there's only a couple options, I like to use the hotkey. So let's use the hotkey space with the letter G to cycle through the Braille grades.
Computer Braille. File manage, uncontracted Braille. File manage, contracted Braille. File manager, F.
Next, let's say I wanted to turn the Braille off. Using the hotkey is the easiest and fastest way of doing this, so I'll press the hotkey backspace with F3.
Braille off. File manager, F.
My Braille display is now showing no Braille, and the virtual Braille shown on the screen is blank. I'll press backspace with F3 again, and my Braille is turned back on.
Braille on. File manager, F.
Now, I'm going to cover other ways to change these same settings. Let's start with Braille code. An alternative to changing the Braille code through the global options is to use a hotkey. The hotkey only allows you to cycle through the different options, so if you go past the option you wanted, you'll have to go through all the options to get back to your preferred setting. That's why I prefer the global options approach for settings with a long list of options. My Braille code is set to US, but I want it at UEB. Fortunately, I know that UEB is right after US in the Braille code settings, so I'll use the hotkey backspace enter with B to move back to UEB.
Braille code, UEB. File manager, F.
If I press it again, it will change the Braille code to the next option, but I don't want to do that, so I'll leave it for now. Next, we will turn the Braille display on and off. I'll start by opening Global Options dialog box by pressing space with the letter O.
Braille display, B, on list item.
The first option is Braille display. Here, I could use space or backspace to change the setting.
Off. On.
My Braille is turned on, which is what I want. Next, I'm going to change the Braille grade. I can navigate to Braille grade by scrolling with space and dot 4,
Braille cursor, C, blinking list item.
but using the letter G as the shortcut key is faster, so let's use that.
View input grade, G, contracted Braille list item.
Now that I'm on the Braille grade setting, I'd like to point out you could find if a setting has a hotkey, which means there's a keystroke to change the setting without going into global options. To find out if a setting has a hotkey, I could press space with dots 3 and 6.
Shortcut key, G, hotkey, space G.
This will tell me the shortcut key, and if there is a hotkey, it will provide me with that information. If no hotkey is provided, that means it doesn't exist. So with Braille grade selected, I'll press space to change to my preferred Braille grade.
Computer Braille. Uncontracted Braille. Contracted Braille.
Now that I have my settings how I want them in the Global Options dialog box, I can press enter and that's going to save all of the settings that I've changed.
Options saved. File manager, F.
Alright, that covers setting up your Braille settings on the Polaris. So to recap, we covered changing the Braille code through the global options by pressing space with the letter O, followed by pressing the letter C twice, then using the space or backspace keys to change the setting, and finally pressing enter to save the settings. We also covered changing the Braille grade by pressing space with the letter G, and how to toggle the Braille on and off using the keystroke backspace with F3. Thanks for watching, and make sure to check out our other videos on how to use HIMS products.